What's up, my Cloud Native fans? Welcome to the show. It's another week. If you didn't get my newsletter this week because you're not on it, you should be. It's Bret.news. It's super easy. You would have known that we're going to have Heroku on the show today. We're going to talk all about new stuff at Heroku. AI, of course, because that's like all we talk about nowadays. Also, there's so much going on. I just want to catch you up real quick before we get to the show and my wonderful guest. Did you know this is a podcast? This actually shows up not just on YouTube and streaming and on Twitch, but you can join in on the audio version that is over at podcast.bretfisher.com. Basically, just go to my website for everything. And we have a wonderful Discord server, about 21,000 people in there, chit-chatting all day about DevOps stuff. It's a fun place. Come hang out with us. That's also right above you, right here. I make it so easy for you. And then get on the newsletter, because that's how you know who's going to be on the show. We have Heroku this week, but this is basically going to be a summer you guessed it, AI everything. Mostly AI for DevOps, but we'll probably talk about other AI related topics. We've got Heroku this week. Upcoming, we've got Keycloak. We've got Solo.io talking about AI gateways. We got Daytona talking about secured infrastructure for running AI development. We've got cloud native build packs coming, which, Heroku kind of invented those. And so they're coming back on the show actually next month to talk about build packs. And we're going to basically do some fun Docker versus build packs, or at least cloud native build packs. And I'm looking forward to that. I'm excited this week because I have been using Heroku for about 15 years. I mean, it's been a long time that I've been using Heroku. And for the majority of that time, I have either run my own workloads on Heroku or helped other people run workloads on Heroku. It has much that you maybe didn't realize, it has not gone away. It is still a great place to, basically, it's the easy button for AWS. So my friend Betty that works at Heroku now, we're having a conversation. We thought they're building their new platform on Kubernetes. They're building all sorts of AI tooling and services for the rest of us. So we've been working on for 2 months now to get this show together, and I'm excited to have my guest on. Julián, what's up?
Hey, Brad. Hello.
If you didn't know, now you know that Heroku is still the place to be. It's still a cool place to run your workloads. And we're here to listen. I'm excited because I don't actually know what we're about to talk about. Like, there's a lot of learning I'm going to be doing in this hour. Julián, you're a principal developer advocate at Heroku. How long have you been there?
That's right. I've been in the company for 6 years now. It's going to be exactly 6 years in August.
Yeah, that's a long time in tech.
Yeah, it is. But I've been in the industry for way longer than that. You
Sure.
can notice by my gray hairs.
Yes, we're sort of we're both like the old guard of
Mhm.
tech. We're the some of us are OG. We tell a lot of stories about 90s technology. I feel like 90s tech is in fashion because now everybody wants to be cool and listen to 80s music, 90s music, 70s music. And so sometimes I just love looking at the old tech channels on YouTube where they're dot matrix printers and how to use paper tape, or some of the CD-ROMs back when we actually had CD burners and computers and stuff like that. So I love the old tech, and that is not this show, but we probably should do more of those because there's still we don't want to lose all that knowledge, and the Wayback Machine is a great way to go look at all that old stuff. So
Of course.
you've been making content for a while. Like,
Yep.
what has happened? Like, what's the catch up of the last 6 years of Heroku?
The last 6 years, well, it happened a lot. So first and foremost, Heroku engineering team has been working on the next generation platform. This has been a full refactor of the infrastructure behind Heroku. Now it's running on like Kubernetes artifacts, using cloud native build packs, because the current generation or the Cedar generation of Heroku used
Hmm.
build packs, but it was kind of like a proprietary version of build packs, not the standard that it's part of the cloud native foundation. And adding like open telemetry support, keeping everything up to date, making sure that the platform keeps growing and maintaining that developer experience that the people is used to. And recently, we also have been working on, of course, AI, and the AI products that we recently announced pretty much last week are pretty exciting. And this is pretty much what we are going to be discussing today. So yeah, we
Yeah.
have been very, very busy here at Heroku. And the other part, well, there is people that don't know, Heroku is part of Salesforce. We have been part of Salesforce like for around like 12 years.
Mm.
And we also have a great story for Salesforce customers on integration. How can they extend their Salesforce applications by relying on compute on Heroku? There is a pretty good story between those two. But we are around, we are building new things, we are improving the platform, and we are happy to continue creating content for all of the developers out there.
Yeah, that's something you mentioned there in terms of engineering geeky details. Um, if you're not someone who's run Heroku, I think ever since I've ever used it, has had sort of versions of the platform, and it all
Mhm.
feels like, at least the instances, it feels like they move. You get new additions, and they've all been trees, right? Like I'm trying to remember what we had
Yep.
before
It
Cedar.
had been it had been trees. So yeah, bamboo, dogwood, cedar. The E1 was like a different project, evergreen, then fir. So yeah, we are on fir now, the F generation.
Yeah, I remember year, I'm probably close to a decade ago. I don't know when Cedar came out, but I remember I had a bunch of workloads running, and we would get notification that like your instances and your infrastructure is now out of date. Let's move you to the new platform. And
Hmm.
it was always that was like the moment where you're like, okay, let me figure out what's the new features, what's the new versions of things that they're going to be using. Um, and I can remember when, I mean, essentially Docker, if people don't know the lore, the history of Heroku, like before Docker was Docker, they were a little company called Cloud that was trying to just replicate Heroku. And
Hmm.
at some point, they just decided to open source the little bits that created all of the workloads. And that was known as Docker. And then, of course, you know, it's now written in internet history that they quickly shut down they realized that the open source they made was actually more valuable than the company they were building as a cloud. So
Hmm.
they quickly pivoted, renamed the company, or at least established a new company, maybe um, moved everybody over, and that company that still exists over a decade later was always their original idea was always like, let's try to do what Heroku's doing. So you and I were actually talking before the show about um, the name Heroku has been around so long, and it's been such a part of the lexicon for so long that
Hmm.
we now say things like that's the Heroku of blah, or that's,
Yep.
instead of saying Paz a lot of times, we just use Heroku because that's such a common term that a lot of people know. And you were saying something about that you had heard some of that stuff recently or whatever.
Yes, and I mean it's all about the developer experience that Heroku brought, like the simplicity of deploying with just one command. Like developers back in the time, they were like getting into Git and now integrating the tool they were using for version control to do also the deployment, the famous Git Heroku master. Right now, it's a Git push Heroku main, and the click to deploy. Like it's simplicity is the same for like provisioning a database. Just go click on a dashboard or run a command, and now you have a fully powered PostgreSQL running for your application. So it makes the management of that platform a joy. Usually,
Hmm.
when you are running applications, you have to make a bunch of decisions where you are going to run what type of instance, operating system, like memory, CPU, networking configuration, etc. But with the Heroku's opinionated platform, you focus on your app, what you want to build, and then let Heroku take care of the rest. Just
Right.
deploy, use our tools to manage the application to scale, and it works. That's what's great about it. So a bunch of companies have been like, okay, this is the standard of developer experience. How can we bring the same developer experience for some other products? And that's pretty much how this AI product born, the Heroku AI, it started from a question: who is going to build the Heroku for AI? And of course, the answer was, well, Heroku is going to build the Heroku for AI. And that's what the team started like, okay, let's figure this out and come up with a great solution. And that's what we announced last week.
Yeah. I mean, I saw the email this week that it's gone, like the AI platform has gone GA. So
Hmm.
we're going to get into some demos. In fact, I think this is going to be one of those demo heavy hours for those of you watching
Yep.
live, because I think, at least for me, the AI stuff is still so new, and MCP and the ideas of agentic, AIs, these are all month old ideas, right?
Yeah.
And there is one of the goals on, honestly, not just this episode but this show in general, is one of my goals is to get through all the marketing hype of like, what is it like to actually run AI? What is it like to spin up MCP tools and actually have your LLM do the work? And everywhere over the internet I look, there's just infinite amounts of AI slop talking about AI that
Mhm.
doesn't give you any actual details. It doesn't give you real world examples of how these things can be used and ways that they fail, ways that they don't, ways that you can protect against hallucinations. There's just so many. I have more questions than answers because
Me too.
a lot of the stuff out there is talking about all this stuff as if it's here, but when you walk around conferences and talk to people, people are like, well, one, they barely know what these concepts are. Two, they're, very few of them are actually seeing productivity gains from agentic MCP like tooling workloads, because these things are like, we're all still just catching up with the feature releases from the last 4 months. And so one of the, I look forward to us actually getting into real examples, understanding the YAML and the code and the various configurations that we have to do, and then how this stuff works together. Because it seems like the internet sells it as if it's magic, but we as engineers know that what magic is in front of the users means that we have to design a platform to present that magic to everyone. So
Of course.
how do these platforms work? How hard is it to build all these tools that didn't exist a year ago or even 6 months ago? So
There is a bunch of people working behind the curtains to be able to maintain the illusion of magic
the
that
illusion, yes,
these
yeah.
platforms offer, of course.
Yeah. So, okay. So this year, if I'm getting this right, Heroku announced that the latest Cedar, right? I think is it Cedar's the new one? Or no, Fur's the new one.
Cedar is the generation that was before. The new one, it's called Fur.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that's
And
running on Kubernetes.
running on Kubernetes, exactly. Running on Kubernetes, the applications are running with cloud native build packs now. It has native OpenTelemetry support. Now you can like connect the metrics that the application generates to any like OpenTelemetry enabled dashboard, and keep working on more and more features. So the next generation is keep getting way more things to satisfy the needs of our customers.
Right.
We have many
Right.
customers that Heroku was renowned for, okay, this is a platform for small companies, startups, students, but the reality is that this is a platform that big companies use. We have large customers that are using not only the compute that we offer, the platform to deploy the applications, but also the data services, PostgreSQL, key value store, the Apache Kafka for Heroku that we maintain, and the whole ecosystem of other add-ons that other third parties and partners bring into the ecosystem. So it's for any type of workflow that you can imagine. And with Fair, one new thing is that the dyno formation, pretty much the dyno is where the application runs.
Yeah.
You could see it kind of like as a little pod or the virtual machine. The dyno formation for Fair is way more dynamic, so you can select both between what is the amount of CPU you need, the memory. There are like different sizes depending if your application is CPU heavy or if it is memory heavy. So it's way better to have more granular control on the costs and the needs of your application. Cedar has like different sizes of dynos, but it is not as dynamic as what Fair is offering.
Yeah.
Before we announced next generation, we released large dynos because we have been working with the like dynos formation for years back, but then applications start like to require it more. Okay, we need more CPU, we need more memory, so we release the XL and XXL dynos to satisfy those needs. And now with Fair, all of those needs are satisfied. And the same has been happening with our database offering. We
Yeah.
keep making sure that our customers have what they need.
Yeah. And for those that haven't actually experienced Heroku, you're kind of known for your database skills. So that I've over the years I've met a number of people that compliment Heroku on their Postgres and the ability for a developer who doesn't have to be a DBA to run all their database infrastructure through Heroku. And I hear a lot of compliments about that over the years. There's something I want to mention too. We didn't actually talk about this before the show, but for those of you watching, if you've taken my courses or doing any of that, like, you've heard me mention 12-factor. And just a reminder, 12-factor is still a thing. Heroku invented it, manages the factors. And last year at KubeCon, they announced on stage that they were going to update the 12-factor. So this is like a very simple, essentially 13-page website. There might be an about page, but a 13-page website that describes 12 different things that are attributes for modern distributed applications. And I continue to preach and talk about these because I personally go and review it every couple of years just to remind myself of where this all came from. Why are we doing what we're doing today as an industry? It all tends to come from lessons learned in the early days of cloud in the late 2000s. Heroku was one of the first, and they sort of created this manifesto that is something that is like a bare bones list of the things that your app should probably have and do in order to be able to scale, to be resilient, to follow best practices. And it's amazing how 15 years later, how accurate some of this stuff still is. Like, we talk about passing in environment variables in here, and it mentions environment variables as the de facto way for us to put information into apps and not to hard code things in apps, which even just 4 years ago, I was still finding companies that were still hard coding things in their applications, not following. And I would always just refer them back to this website. Like, look, you should go read this, then go read the DevOps handbook. Like, then you got to catch up from 15 years of all that knowledge that we've been passing. The funny thing I've been saying on this podcast recently is, the 12-factor app. I'm not sure how much we've changed on the website yet. I've been trying to follow the releases, but you have added a GitHub button to take you to the repo, which the repo's always existed, I think.
But the thing is that the 12 factors were not open source. Now at KubeCon, we announced the 12 factors as open source. Now there is a working group that meets every week to be able to see how these 12 factors needs to be updated to the new way of building and deploying applications, because the cloud also evolves. Yeah. Even though many of these factors still applies, there are like some other things that has to be considered to keep the pace of what's happening.
For sure.
So, and it is not only Heroku working. There are like people from IBM, from other different companies that like get together and try to come up with all of the experience that they have in the industry to come up with this new updated version of the 12 factors.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you could definitely see little cracks in the design. Like, I remember, we kind of, Cloud Native has made it popular to talk about secrets as files, not necessarily as environment variables. And it doesn't have those little minutia details because this was written before Docker and Kubernetes were ever even conceived. And but I think honestly my most popular one that I refer, especially over the last decade as we've all adopted containers, was the logs one, because logs pre-containers, teams were implementing a lot of manual. They had log engines and file writing engines inside their apps, it became the app's responsibility to decide how logs were written, decide the format they were going to be, where they were going to be stored, usually in a file on the hard drive of the servers. And the idea that logs really should be exported out of your app as standard in, standard out, and like you shouldn't code specific log engines and functionality into each one of your apps, was such a freeing idea, because then it meant that I could solve the logging problem once, and then all my apps could join onto that bandwagon, and they would just work because they were using standard out. And still today,
it comes with performance. It comes with performance cost. If you are doing all of the logging in your application, I mean, your application needs to be doing
and memory.
What your application have to do exactly.
Yeah, so we're not here to talk about it, but we are talking about it for a minute. But like,
of course,
that just a reminder of everyone out there, like Heroku invented that. It was one team's manifesto. It was definitely not a consortium of the internet's opinions. But it was very opinionated, and I think we needed that at the time because the cloud was relatively new. Nobody knew how to write distributed cloud native apps. We didn't even have that term of cloud native yet, and it was nice to have something that was very succinct. It was very quick read. You could read the whole thing in less than a half an hour, really, and it was very digestible. And I think it was an amazing. It was perfect for the time it was in. I'm glad we're going to see some updates to it and whatnot. So, all right, inventors of the manifesto now writing on Kubernetes. Let's get into AI because I want to make sure we focus the rest of this time.
Let's get into the cool stuff right now, of course.
Yeah. So,
of course,
what are we doing with AI?
Okay, so if we can like show my website here, so I can like easily navigate. Okay, this is heroku.com/AI if you want to see what we announce. We release pretty much one thing was already here, which is PG Vector, a vector database based out of Postgres. Vector databases are like widely used on AI applications, mostly for retrieval augmented generation type of patterns. When you store text information as vectors on a database and you're performing semantic searches to be able to retrieve context to augment the LLM. But last week we released one, it is the Managed Inference and Agents product. Basically, you can provision a LLM model to your application with the same developer experience that Heroku has, with one command or one click. And now you have the model in your app. And it is managed. I mean, it means that it is running on our infrastructure, so there is no risk of your private data going to third-party services. And we support known models like Claude from Anthropic 3.5, 3.7, Cohere for embeddings, and Stable Diffusion for image generation. Those are models that we support, and we are also working to keep updating models and adding more. So that's the part of managed inference. Basically, I can use this service. It uses an API that is based out of the OpenAI compatibility. So you can perform chat completions and use tool calling with local tool execution. The other part is the agents, which is the most interesting. So with the agents part of the service, we have a set of tools that we maintain that can let you access your database on a safe way. So you give permissions to the inference to access your Heroku database, or a way to execute untrusted code, meaning code that has been generated by the model, by the LLM, running on a dyno and generating the output and giving the output back to the inference. And the tools that we support for code execution are right now, it's Python, of course, Ruby, Go, and Node.js. So you can ask the LLM to generate Node.js code, and it will create that code, execute it safely on Heroku, return the response back to the inference, and there is many applications that you can do with that. You can also execute commands on a dyno. So this is for running trusted code. So you can have like a script worker or something that is running on your dyno, and you can just use the tool that comes within the agent to run that trusted code. And some other document reading tools. One is HTML to Markdown. The other one is PDF to Markdown. You can pass a document, a URL, and it will give you the contents of that document. So those are tools Heroku maintains that comes within the same agents endpoint. But the other option is, okay, we have this thing which is MCP. Right now, the ecosystem is using MCP to give LLMs the ability to run tools, to execute actions, to get access to external resources. And this MCP became the de facto standard for this type of agentic applications. This is a standard by Anthropic. and has been widely used. Recently, OpenAI announced they are adding MCP support to their agents. Google, many other libraries and frameworks to run and create agents have MCP support. And there are like two ways to run MCPs. One is running MCPs locally, which is called the STDIO transport, standard input and output. You are running a program locally and basically communicating with that application with JSON RPC. It is a very simple protocol. And the other one is running on top of HTTP. So the HTTP is a stream HTTP with server-side events or with HTTP stream, and that's a way to access the MCP server remotely.
Yeah, I should point out real quick that for those that are catching up on MCP, because it's we're talking about it in chat, the idea of MCP. You may have actually already used it, or at least the first time I think a lot of us experienced this is in our developer IDEs, when suddenly we had agent mode, and a lot of them they all have different terms, but we don't really have a standard. But somewhere the word agent is implied or said in there, and the ability for it to not just print what command you should run, but also run the command for you, which means it can have access to standard in, standard out to the shell, and probably there's some pseudo terminal in the background there, but that's all like we just see, oh, the AI can run a command for me now. But what's really happening on the back end is that LLM is accessing tools, and the shell is probably the most universal tool of all, other than HTTP. So it's actually something that we're all inadvertently using. I mean, even if you're using Cloud Desktop, or I'm using ChatGPT, the desktop app, and it has access to things on my computer, and this stuff is all happening in the background, access to file systems, which means it has file system as a tool. These are, sometimes I think the internet makes it overly complicated and talk about, oh, you can access, your GitHub APIs, and you can access your APIs over your AWS APIs and all these different things. And it's like, well, actually the simplest example is the one that you're using today. Because we all very quickly, it wasn't that long ago, and some of us are still doing this, that we were all copy and pasting out of a web browser into our editor, and that was and then copy and pasting out of our editor back into the browser, and that was the most painful. I do not miss 2022, 2023 in terms of the early days of AI. But now that we have this, like you said, this MCP protocol, it's not even really a standard yet, but because it's so brand new, but it is the de facto standard, like you said. And I love that you defined the two different the two different communication methods, because it's subtle, but when you're building these things yourself, you've got to understand those, right?
And I define it because it's very important for the second part also of this release, which is the MCP support on Heroku. Now you can deploy MCPs, like local MCPs with STDIO transport, deploy them to Heroku, like as you have been deploying all your life with one click or one command, and access those MCPs from the inference service. So the same tool access that we have with the tools we maintain, you can also specify, okay, access this MCP that I already deployed. And we have also the MCP gateway. So you can have all of those MCPs that you have configured for your application, access them through an HTTP endpoint that we are providing. And that endpoint is already with authentication, and it is managing all of those MCPs. So we are adding also that support to pretty much transform that local STDIO MCP into a remote one, which is amazing. And those are some of the things that I want to show. And speaking of MCPs, one thing that I found super useful recently, I've been relying a lot on AI IDs right now to create my demos. I'm using Cursor recently, but this works with any other IDE that supports MCPs, like Visual Studio Code with GitHub Copilot, or Windsurf, or Zed, or like Cloud Desktop. All of those support.
So many things. I mean, even Warp Terminal now has MCP in the beta. Oh, yes. So like even our terminals
Amazon Q recently added the MCP support, so you are seeing it in anywhere. So I am not a designer. I don't know anything about like CSS of all of those things. And I recently have been like building more front end applications. And we had like some brand guidelines and instructions on a Figma file online with a lot of different colors, styles, and I don't have time to go and generate the CSS based
Recreate.
out of
Yeah.
that. So I use the Figma MCP, paste the URL, and ask, okay, create the Tailwind CSS theme based off out of this Figma file. And it automatically fetched all the metadata, created the CSS files for me, and I was like, okay, now this is powerful. Now I can do
Yeah.
real things with this, which is
Real things.
amazing.
Yeah.
And we
The real things are
also you
important.
yeah, of course. You were speaking something before we started the show about agentic DevOps. We also released the Heroku MCP server. So with the Heroku MCP server, you have access to Heroku from an agent. So you can deploy an application, you can scale or downscale an application, get access to logs, provision a database, perform migrations, etc.
Mm.
So now all of
All
those
through an
things
LLM.
can be done also from the LLM, from the
Yeah.
IDE. And why not using the managed inference and agents to create an application that also manages Heroku itself? So it's kind of meta, but
It is.
it
Yeah.
is possible as well.
It's very full circle. I like to use the word meta.
Yeah.
Like it's like, okay, I'm using AI to write an MCP, which is in front of an API that will then be used by my LM and a lot of us I think are using, because we don't really have a good experience yet. We're all using developer IDEs to do this, to have this conversation with an LLM that's really just talking to other APIs on the internet. Yep. And I was recently experimenting with Notion, pulling in information from Notion, pulling it in from Google Drive, and then doing some interesting stuff with it, and then writing it back to Notion, and which is just a note-taking app. And I get why everybody's talking about MCP right now, because the idea that the AI can now not just access all of my information everywhere, but also write back and actually make logical sense of something that maybe, or it creates something new out of something I already have. That was not something that we envisioned 2 years ago, when we were just chatting with a chatbot, essentially. I felt like, at least for me, it sort of came by surprise when we first started seeing the agent modes and the ideas of these things accessing tooling. It's been a pretty cool thing to be a part of, I think. So if for those of you watching, if you haven't really dove into what MCP is and tried to get basic, just a bit even just using curl, like just using a basic curl command as a tool for your LLM, so that it can run the curl for you. Like I would say, read my documentation, or read my newsletter that I just posted last week on MCP, because it's really easy to get started. You can do it in Docker or in any of your developer IDEs, but Docker has a really easy way inside of Docker Desktop to get started playing around with this. Because I feel like this is all I'm going to be doing for the rest of the year, honestly. Like trying to get useful MCP workflows so that we can start talking about, how do we do this in CI? How do we do this for deployments? How do we do this for platform engineering? How do we take advantage of all this for troubleshooting and recovery of failure? There's just so many scenarios, and so we're not going to be able to cover them all today, but we're going to try.
It's very, very, very exciting. And this is an invitation for all of you that are now building MCPs. Go deploy those to Heroku. Add the deploy to Heroku button to your MCP, so people can easily go click and have the MCP available. That's one thing I did with a open source MCP that I found for Perplexity. I just forget, added the deploy to Heroku button, and it's a breeze to deploy. And we can show that later today in the demos.
Yeah. All right, let's do it.
Let's do it. So let's start from the beginning. Of course, I'm going to my favorite place in this computer, which is the terminal. And I'm going to start from an application. So I have here an application that I created. It's a very, very basic Node.js application. I'm a JavaScript developer. I've been doing JavaScript for more than 12 years or so. So this is a very basic JavaScript application that I will deploy to Heroku. So let's create an Heroku application. Heroku create, Heroku Mia app, like manage inference and agents. I'm going to create the application. I have the app, beautiful. And then I'm going to be deploying my app. So this is a Git-based application. So what I'm going to do is the Git push Heroku main, and now my app is going live. So that's the Heroku experience to deploy an application. You need to have your application on Git, run one command, or click on one button, or add it from the dashboard, and then your application is up and running. To enable the model, to provision the model, we are going to also run a command. And you can also do it from the dashboard, and we can show you the dashboard way later. So right now I'm on this Heroku Mia application that I created. Then I will provision a model. So first I'm going to be using the AI plugin that I have already installed, but it's an extension of the Heroku CLI to list the available models that I can provision to my application. So here we can see that we have access to Claude 3.5 and 3.7, the embeddings model from Cohere, and the image generation from Stability, the stable diffusion one. So let's provision the Cloud 3.7. So Heroku AI models create, and I give the name of the model that I want to provision. And I'm currently on the context of my application. So it will go ahead and add that add-on to my app. And that's it. Now my application, if you have been using Heroku, you know that all of the configuration variables are stored as environment variables. So if I run Heroku config here, I'm going to see three variables. One is going to be the inference URL, which is going to be the API URL that I'm going to connect. The other one is going to be the model ID, which will represent the Cloud 3.7 Sonnet model that I just provisioned. And the other one is the inference key, which is the API key that I will use to perform my inference calls. And that's how you provision inference to an application.
Yeah. So this has got auth built into it
Yeah.
through the API key. Yeah.
Yeah. One command, or if you go to dashboard, let's say I have, let's create a new application here. So this is Bret's Mia demo. I'm going to select the CDAR for this, create the application, and now go to resources. And I'm going to search for manage inference and agents and select the model that I want to provision. Sonnet, provision, boom, I have access to it. So now that's how I enable AI into my app.
Right. So it's like you're getting a path with a defined URL. So for those that haven't actually set anything up like this is a very normal workflow where you usually get 2 or 3 environment variables. Even if you're running locally, like I just put out a demo recently of using Docker's model runner. So like running a AI open source model, not Sonnet, but like Llama or DeepSeek or one of the other ones, running them locally. And it's going to be the same OpenAI API standard that we kind of all have settled on. It's going to give you the URL. It's going to give you the name of the model that you need to tell the app. And then for local, you don't really have an API key, but for remote, obviously you need one. So this feels so far like exactly like I would make any other LLM enabled app. Yeah,
exactly. And if we are going to use it raw, let's go to Postman here. If we are going to be using this like raw with an HTTP request directly to the API, so I'm connected to that base URL, which is usinference.heroku.com, or we also have like an Europe endpoint as well. And the path is going to be the chat completions. So this is the basic inference. And this is following the same OpenAI shape of the body. So I'm specifying the model. In this case, my model is Claude. And then I will send an array of messages, which is going to be the conversation that I'm having in the chat. And here I will alternate between like user and assistant, and I can have like a system prompt depending on how you want to set up this and execute. I'm going to ask a question as an user. What is Heroku? It will perform the call to the inference, and it will give me the response. And this is similar shape as the OpenAI API. You can also use, for example, an OpenAI SDK in Python or JavaScript to interact with this endpoint. And here we have Heroku is a cloud platform. There we have the whole response as it comes in Markdown and the like all the usage information, the tokens that this operation cost. And one thing about like managed inference is it is a Mether add-on, so it's going to be charged by the token, so the number of tokens that you are using. And that's the very basic of inference right now, which is what you can get pretty much everywhere right now with using an LLM. Since this also supports that OpenAI specification, you can have tool execution from this endpoint, but this tool execution is going to be just functions. So you are providing function with the description of what that function does. Let the inference choose the function to run. It will come up with the parameters, and then you locally will need to implement like the function that it will be executed. The cool thing about managed inference is the agents part, which is the agents endpoint. So we have here the agents Heroku endpoint, and we have different tools. So let me go to the documentation page. So I show you the different tools we have. I mentioned that we have the dyno run command. So you can run a command in your dyno. So you specify the function, the tool to rule, dyno run command, the application where that command lives, and all of the different parameters for that command. We have Postgres get schema and Postgres run query. So you are giving access to your Postgres database hosted on Heroku, and then it will be able to get the schema, understand the shape of your database before it tries to go and do a query, so it properly generate a real query. Because usually it will try to hallucinate and come up with something that is not necessarily part of your database schema, or you will need to give that context in the prompt. So with this tool that get a schema, it is going directly to the source. And run query, similar, go generate the query with the LLM, go run the query and get the results back. My favorites ones are code execution. So I told you before that we have Go, Node, Python, and Ruby so far, support for those natively. But we also release as open source those tools as MCPs. So you can use these externally for your own applications. Or, for example, I'm using this open source MCP code exec Python to have some customization, like install or pre-install some dependencies that I need, have something more customized that the regular tool doesn't have. So it saves me time by doing certain workloads. But these code execution tools support dependency management, so you can specify the type of dependencies that you are going to use for this application. So it's going to perform the installation in Python with pip, Node with npm, etc. And the other tools are like HTML to Markdown and PDF to Markdown, which reads a URL or a PDF file and it gives you the content. So the raw, how can I see this as an HTTP request? Well, go calculate in Python the 14th Fibonacci number. I specify that I will use the code exec Python tool. I will run this. And now this will return the response as a stream. And it will go do the inference, execute the code on a dyno, on a one-off dyno on Heroku. So this is not an application that is constantly running. So it's just going to run When this command is executed, then it's going back to sleep. So you are not going to be charged for a long running application, and it finishes. So you see here the messages. First, okay, I will calculate this number. For that, I will use this tool, code exec Python, and this is the code that I will execute. Fantastic. So it generated code, passed the code to the tool, then the tool performed the execution. So this is what the tool returned. The return code was successful. This is the answer. And then the last message is the inference taking that answer and giving you a response, which is what you are going to use at the end. A markdown response, the Fibonacci calculation result, the 14 Fibonacci number is 377. So it's doing that execution. And I can change these from Python to Ruby and calculating Ruby the 14 Fibonacci number. And it will do the same, but now it will generate Ruby code and it's going to execute this Ruby application on the dyno. So here it finished. We see based on the calculation, the response is a little bit different, but the execution, we get here the code exec Ruby. And in the first message, we are going to see the code that it generated, which is this. But of course, we are using just raw HTTP for doing these operations. Sometimes it's hard to see what's going on behind. So I created this demo. This is open source. We can share the URL later. It's on Heroku examples. It's called AI Inference Chat. This is a React.js application with a Node.js backend that uses Mia. I can select the model that I will execute and select the tool that I will run. And for example, here, let's say print Bret in ASCII mode. So it knows that I'm selecting the Node.js tool, that I'm asking for a tool execution, hopefully. And I will see the output in a moment. So let's see if it comes with the proper response. Okay, it's I will create the ASCII version of the name Bret. I see the code execution here. This is the Node.js code that it generated, and it executed the code and gave me the response. So everything is running on the dyno on Heroku. The LLM, the model is doing all that code generation. And now we start like thinking about other use cases. Okay, if I also have access to my database, I have access to this LLM generated code. Everything is safe, trusted, is running on the same infrastructure. I'm not leaking any information, but the possibilities are like pretty huge.
Yeah.
And yes, the other models that we support, like the image generation, so generate purple React, why not? And this will use a stable diffusion to generate the image. So you can also have like the image generation in your application, or the embedding for retrieval augmented generation applications using Heroku Postgres. And look at that beautiful image, also created by the model.
I'd take that boat.
Oh, of course, of course, and I love the color, of course.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
So that's the basic of what we are giving, like the managed inference, the tools that we support for agents, and this is the type of applications that you can build. But I have not covered MCP yet. So should we go to MCP demos, or there is any question in the chat, or do you have any question?
Yeah, for the audio podcast, Robot Glock's asking, does Heroku have a means to create mini vector databases like platform, OpenAI, storage, vector stores? I've been using those to create mini MCPs, services for React, Redux, docs, and code samples.
So right now, the support for vector databases that we have is through Postgres. Mm-hmm. So we support the vector extension. with your Postgres database, you just enable that extension, and that's it. Use it as any data that you're going to store in there. And with Cohere, the model that we host, you can generate those embeddings and store them on the vector database.
Nice. All
More
right,
things to come. Safe harbor, I cannot talk about that, but we might have some cool things in our pocket to show recently.
Yeah, this is 1.0, right? Like this is the beginning of all this stuff too.
This is just the beginning. We are just starting.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so we've got MCP. We understand that like we're giving the LLM access to these tools, and so then it becomes sort of a question of what tools are built in. How can I get my tools on there? Where do I go find tools? And these are all like the kind of questions that I hear from the community is, MCP tools are the new hotness. So I feel like we're all going to be walking around with a giant tool bag of like our favorite MCP tools. And for me, it's like lately it's been, how can I use Notion? How can I use all the ones that Docker provides? They have a new toolkit selection, and there's having access to Chrome, giving it the ability to use Chrome in the background, and all of my internet, anything that I'm storing on the internet, anything in the cloud, I feel like is either Kubernetes. There's already several examples of using MCPs with that. There's everything from Google Drive MCPs to just common Linux utilities having an MCP wrapper around them, so that we can, instead of just having it print a shell command, we can actually have it running the command in the background and understanding the results and interpreting them, versus us just seeing raw shell output on our screen. So I feel like I'm just barely touching the surface with my pinky toe of what's available, but it's still right now. For me, learning as like, maybe, I don't know if even this is a pro tip. I have started to have to force myself to use MCP to do things rather than the old way I was used to doing them, like clicking on a website, simply because my brain isn't working this way yet. Like this is actually such a mind shift for us to say, I'm not going to go copy and paste that from that website and then put that over here and then put these things together and analyze it in a spreadsheet. Like it's actually faster for me in some of these use cases to use the LLM with its new MCP tool capability to do all that for me. But it's like I personally have had to force myself to try them and figure out where, maybe using the curl one, for example, maybe asking it to curl a website 100 times and it's actually like running an individual curl command 100 times. Not very efficient. It wasn't in parallel. It was like doing them one at a time in the chat window. And I realized, okay, so that's not a good thing. Like, I have to learn like what things work well right now, what things are maybe not ideal in MCP land. So for those of you out there listening, like it's not like the rest of us have this all figured out and we know all the workflows and you don't. This is still all pretty new stuff that we have to figure out what's useful and what's not. So disclaimer.
And also to demystify MCPs, they are like, it's just an application.
Yeah.
You have access to official SDKs. If you go to model contextprotocol.io, there are like many official SDKs that you can use. You can build them in Java, you can build them on .NET, Python, TypeScript, and it's just an application that you build and you run it locally. You can deploy it to a platform like Heroku and adapt like an API or whatever you need for your app. You mentioned like where to find MCPs and things like that. I don't know if there is kind of like a centralized official way. There are many directories that you can find. The one I use is Cursor directory. There is an MCP category, and here there is a collection of like thousands of MCPs that you can have for your application. We also published our Heroku MCP server here if you wanna use it, and later I'm going to be talking about it. But I want to show the MCP capabilities that a managed inference and agents has. So let's go back to our demos. I have two MCPs deployed. One is the exec Python MCP, which is the open source version that I mentioned that you can deploy to Heroku. It lives on our Heroku repository on GitHub. And you can deploy these by just clicking the deploy to Heroku. And the other one that I deployed here, it's the Brave search. It's a common MCP that you can find to perform search using Brave. You will need to have like an API key, but I already deployed this. And you can enable or give access to your application to these MCPs. For example, remember that we created this app. We have the Heroku Managed Inference and Agents. I'm going to click on the dashboard. And here we have access to, okay, look, this is the MCP Brave that we have access to. This is how can I integrate these or have access to this MCP through the gateway. So it's giving me an URL with server send event, the token that I will use for authentication, and now I can use this MCP remotely. But I also can use this as part of my agent, as part of my inference. So if I go to Toolkit, I can see all of the methods that are available for me on my application. I can have multiple MCPs attached to my app. And how can I execute that? So the same as another tool, instead of specifying Heroku tool, I'm specifying the name of the tool that I will execute, the name of the tool that is part of the MCP that I just deployed. And here I'm doing a query. What's the most recent Heroku announcement? And this will go and do that search on Brave using that MCP. So the first message is, okay, I'm going to be doing a call using the Brave web search with these parameters. And then this is the result of that tool execution. This is what it returned. And the last one, which is what we are interested in, is the inference process that returned. And now we see that the most recent Heroku announcement, Streamlit, we support like a Streamlit template, and the end of life of Heroku 20 stack, the next generation. So we can see some of the different things that came up with that Brave search. So this is a way to give access to your application to other MCPs by just deploy them to Heroku. How to deploy? This is the Perplexity Ask MCP that I forked. You just need to add one thing to the MCP. So Heroku uses a file called the proc file to define the process that is going to be executed when you deploy the application. By default, we use the web process type to run a long-running application, but we also specified this, and this is new, the MCP process type to specify that this is a MCP. So you can start the name of that process with MCP and then add any other word. This needs to be unique per application because this is used as a namespace. So if you are using multiple MCPs, it is good to have like a unique name here.
Yeah.
And now when I deploy this Perplexity Ask to Heroku, let's do that. Go and click to deploy. I'm going to be deploying to that theme that we are using. I have a bunch of themes here, but we are using the Mia demos. Let's do Perplexity Ask MCP. It is available. Fantastic. Now, it needs an API key. I'm going to be putting a fake API key right now because I don't have it. So we cannot use this MCP, but we are going to see how to deploy it and how to attach it to the application. And this will perform the regular Heroku process. It will take this application, detects that it is Node.js, install all of the dependencies, and it will keep the application there for us so we can attach it to our app. So now that the...
Real quick, I have some questions. So like, okay, so you're taking MCP, you're adding the proc file to it so that Heroku understands what to do, and then you're creating it like it's a normal Heroku app. I mean, like the workflow
It's a normal
seems,
Heroku app.
Yeah, yep. But you're saying that because it's MCP, these things are only executed when they're called, right? So it's almost,
Yes.
in this case, they're almost like a lambda or a function as a service, something like that, where they're
Yes.
sitting idle. So you're not. So if I had 30 MCPs and my app isn't calling them, it's not like I'm being charged for
You are not being charged
30.
for anything.
Yeah, yeah,
Exactly.
okay,
Because we charge by the dyno usage, and right now that application is not running on any dyno.
right.
And when the inference service called this tool, it spins a one-off dyno. So it goes, spins the dyno, execute the application, gets the result, and takes the dyno down. So
Yeah,
it
so it's
will
almost
only
like you're
charge for
caching them.
that.
Yeah, like I guess you're caching them so that it'll be faster in calling them and whatnot. So it has to do that initial setup to do. Yeah, because I mean, I mean, back in the day when Heroku had free dynos and they would like shut down after a certain number of no
Yep.
requests or whatever, I would always have like personal projects on there that were little tiny apps or whatever, and they would auto spin up and spin down based on HTTP calls. So kind of also like Lambda, but in this case, where these are these are so tiny in some cases, they're just you could almost think of them like as I do a function.
Yep.
Is that they have like a single use, my curl example or this example of using perplexity to. So I'm assuming in the background, all this MCP is doing is it would call the perplexity API.
Exactly. It's kind
Yeah.
of like a wrapper, but using the MCP specification, so the agent knows how to execute this tool. And this is why it
Okay.
is asking me for that API key. If I have access to the Perplexity API key, I can just show you how it will perform that query to the Perplexity MCP. And then how can I enable that MCP into my application? So I go to my app, go to the Manage Inference and Agents setup page, go to Setup, and I attach it as an application. So I will search Perplexity, and let's add also that Python one that we have, the MCP Python. So now I attach two MCPs to my app. And if I go to the toolkit, and let me refresh, now I have access to other two tools, the code exec Python, which is exposed by the Python MCP, and the Perplexity Ask tool, which is exposed by the Perplexity MCP. And you can see the namespace. This is pretty much what I defined on the proc file. This start word of the proc file, this is the namespace that I'm using here. And if I go click to this tool, it is giving me, okay, this is the input parameters that this MCP accepts. So the agent knows how to talk to this MCP and what type of parameters it's going to pass. The exec Python receive code, but you can also specify a list of packages. Web search, it uses a query and the number of results that you want to get, etc. But I mentioned, okay, now I can use these within my app, but we also have this MCP toolkit or the MCP gateway where I can expose those tools that I deploy to my app to use them externally, let's say on Cursor, Cloud Desktop, or any other agentic application that supports MCP. So by using this URL, which is the remote server sent events version for my MCP and my token, I can do something like, here I am in Cursor. I enable the Heroku MCP gateway. So you can see that I'm calling that URL with the authentication token that I specify. And I have access to Brave local search and Brave web search. If I refresh, do I have access to the other ones? I'm not sure if I am pointing out to the, oh yes, I got access to the other ones that I specify, the exec Python and the Perplexity Ask. So now I have access to those MCPs that I just deployed to Heroku remotely, and I can use them on Cursor. So it is a way to host MCPs not only for the local inference service for your apps, but also externally through this gateway. So that's another of the powerful things that we have on our AI offering. Any
Real quick, I want
questions?
I was while you were showing that off, I was realizing, okay, there are, if this is new to you, which this was 2 months ago, this was brand new to me. I was drawing out a little diagram. I don't know if you can see my screen, but
Yep.
I was trying to imagine like the flow of like I'm a user in a browser locally, and so you in this case you have an example web chat app that
Yep.
is just a regular Heroku app, and then that is connected to the MCP tools, and you have a specific tool that knows how to talk to the Perplexity API, but
Yep.
this is all living inside Heroku, right? So
Heroku, exactly.
yeah, so this is kind of like in the safe enclave of Heroku's networking. It's like in my Heroku account, and then that MCP tool is calling out to a external service. So it's, in this case, it's calling out to Perplexity's API, which is not anything related to Heroku. It's just a if someone hasn't heard of Perplexity, it's the AI version of Google search, provides interesting results in an interesting way. And so they have their own API, and you're adding I think of this as like an API proxy, like these MCP tools.
It could. Yeah. MCP could be considered sometimes, not always, but sometimes could be like an API wrapper.
Yeah, like a wrapper. Yeah, and and then obviously the Perplexity API returns results to the tool, which returns the results of the app, and then you see them on the screen. So this is all happening with every request that you're sending to the LLM, and it calls out that tool. And the thing is, it's like whenever we're using all
when the inference service decide that it needs to execute that tool, because it depends. Maybe the query that I'm doing, the question that I'm asking, it doesn't need to run that Perplexity tool, so it will not use it.
Yeah,
so that's depending on the prompt. Yeah.
Yeah, and Robot Glock was talking about Perplexity overlaps Brave. Like we have multiple MCP tools. So actually, this is incorrect. I wouldn't want to do this. I would do this over here. And so if we have multiple tools, the Heroku app the LLM knows based on the human language that we describe these things in. So there is a possibility of overlap if you call two MCP tools. I actually did this just 3 days ago. If you in the MCP definitions, if you're referring to the same tools, two different tools in a similar fashion, it's easy for you to accidentally call one instead of the other. At least currently, that's something I did the other day. So this would be the Brave. Is in this case with your MCP tool for Brave, is it actually running like is there like a Brave library? I don't actually know. I only think of Brave as the browser. Is that what we're?
Yeah, it is. It is using also the Brave search API.
Yeah. Okay.
It is another API.
I didn't know if that was like a service on the internet, like if Brave was providing a search API on the internet, or if this was literally just like
it provides a service. You can create like a Brave account and get API keys. And for free, you can get like a certain amount of queries per month.
Oh, okay. I wasn't aware of that one. So
the difference is that Brave search is just doing a search, and Perplexity is doing inference and doing research and doing thinking. So it's giving you a way different response, just like the list of things that it found on a normal search engine. Perplexity is doing like now thinking and inference on top of those results, and it will give you like a different response.
Right. Yeah. And something, because one of the first things I did, like this is, I don't know if this is like going to be the classic tale of people learning MCP. The first thing I did was like I just loaded up a bunch of MCP servers. And like, oh yeah, I want Chrome, I want curl, I want this, I want Google Drive, I want everything I possibly could use. All the tools that I recognize, I just started enabling them all. And this is in a similar workflow to, we talked about IDEs earlier. That's essentially are the MCP clients. In this case, I think this would technically be the MCP client, right? But if I'm running locally, like in a Cursor IDE or something, it's acting as the MCP client. And I made the mistake of enabling too many, and two of them had curl in them. So I was noticing that it was calling the wrong tool because I had two tools that had similar names. And that the thing is like we're so used to defining a spec and like calling functions, calling out to a function, and we have a very precise name, and every language has a very precise. You don't make them up. They're like, you have to call it that function name when you're asking for that, or you're not going to get you're going to get an error. But in LLM land, it's like I'm chatting with a bot, so in order to, I have to use words that are going to make it think that it needs to use that. There's no like ID for the tool that I'm aware of that I can tell the LLM, oh yeah, use that tool by ID. It's not normal to a programmer to talk loosely about, hey, go over to GitHub, go over to GitHub and pull my PRs for all my repos. Like I'm not telling it which I have in the background. I have to give it a pat when I configure it, just like you're doing here with your API keys for these APIs. But it's not like when I when I tell the LLM to go do stuff, that I'm telling it which of my tools I want it to do in which order and exactly. I'm just very loosely describing problems to it, and it's figuring out with my human language, my English, how to find which tool it needs to do the job. So this is something that I think all of us will learn as you play around and play with these things. But it's not. I didn't find it intuitively when I first started using it. At first I was like, okay, but what do I call this tool when I tell LM to do it? Like, what's the name of it? And I just realized, I just need to describe it like a human having a conversation with another human. That's how I call these things. So,
and it will depend on the model. Different models do agent planning differently.
Oh, okay.
So there might be like one model that select these tools, and the other model is going to select the other ones depending of their planning,
their
approach.
mood. Yeah. Right. Okay.
And last but not least is the Heroku MCP server. So remember I mentioned you can also manage Heroku by using an MCP. And this MCP, we build it pretty much to use it on AI IDEs like Cursor. I have this Heroku MCP here. So let me disable the gateway, because you're going to notice something. You were talking about like different tools and stuff. Cursor, for example, has a limit of 40 tools. So if it has more than 40 tools, it starts kind of like, I don't know what to do. Yeah. Cloud Desktop has support for 100, if I'm not wrong. So it depends also of the tool, the client you are using, how many tools it supports.
Right.
So let's go with the Heroku one. And we have like different type of tools here for list applications, provision a database, deploy an application, do an inference call, etc. And let's see if this works. So let's go and open a new chat with my cursor, and let's say read the logs of the Mia Inference Chat app and tell me if it's healthy. So I'm hoping it will now choose the tool, get app logs. Now it's going to Heroku, is getting that information, and it's analyzing. Okay, the logs show that the application is receiving requests, is responding with 200, and it has some Heroku inference logs. It seems the application is normal. Okay. Do I need to scale my app? It will check depending of the logs, if like the metrics that I'm getting in the request response. So now it is doing analyzing the logs. It is checking the instance where it's running, the dyno. And now it is telling me, do you like to proceed with the scaling the application? So it gave me like some recommendations here, but I'm not going to continue. But you get the gist. Now I'm using the MCP and the agent to perform DevOps for me.
Yeah, and something subtly happened in the background there. Again, for those that are new to MCP, so each MCP server has a list of these tools that it can do, and you're showing those in the middle. Like you actually have you turned off the gateway, but you're showing them, and they have names there, and they don't really mean much to us. We can infer from the way like list add-ons like that I can sort of guess what that means to me, but through my human language that I'm asking the LLM in your chat window, it picked one to use, And that's the moment when you go, okay, yeah, it did choose the correct tool for me this time. Because when you scroll up, people might have missed it if they're not used to this interface. But this MCP client did tell you this is the one I'm going to choose to get my answers
And it
essentially.
is asking for permission to
Yeah.
execute this tool. You can do like what people call the YOLO mode, which is execute everything automatically. I don't like that because I don't know what you are going to run. I wanna be
Right.
sure before
That is
giving you
true.
permission to do it.
I don't YOLO in production, but I definitely like to YOLO. Although they've changed the name now, so it's not as fun anymore. They don't call it YOLO. It's just
Yeah, it
like
is auto
auto
execution
agent.
or
Yeah, it's so
something like
boring.
that. Yeah.
Just call it YOLO. Let's have some fun in our jobs at least.
YOLO was
Yeah,
more risky.
yeah.
So yeah, that's the Heroku MCP server do DevOps for you on your agent application. And also, if you are asking, you can also deploy the Heroku MCP server to Heroku, use it within the managed inference and agents. So build an application to manage your own Heroku app. Build an application that manages itself. That would be good.
I mean,
And
yeah.
yeah,
Go ahead. Go ahead. I mean, there is a future. Sorry, there is a future scenario. Like if I'm not really great at reading tea leaves, but like there is a scenario where there is an AI that you got an LLM that's sitting there waiting to be prompted, and we could have a scenario where event alerts, like traditional alerting coming out of Prometheus or whatever our monitoring solution is, it sees alerts and it feeds those alerts to the LLM first, and then that LLM can actually kick off certain tools. Maybe they're in read-only mode for a long time because we're scared of what the LLM might decide. But then the LLM interprets and pulls out some different information and then presents it to the human in more than just, I mean, if you've been doing this long enough, you've designed alert responses, back in the day when I was, first using Datadog 15 years, almost 15 years ago. And for each alert we would set up, I would have to describe the header or the title of that alert, and then you would put in templates into the alert body to show statistics that were coming out of your alert system, coming out of your monitoring system rather.
yep.
And there is a scenario where those alerts are now being fed to an LLM to begin with, so that the LLM can then decide how severe this is and who to contact. When I'm thinking of PagerDuty, these are all kind of science fiction-y things right now because I think we're all playing around, but no one. I don't know how many people out there are seriously using this stuff day to day. But I just see this as we haven't really addressed the whole, like, are we replacing ourselves with AI? I just don't see that happening anywhere in the near future. I see this as just augmenting us with more data to help us make our own decisions and to do the human aspects of decision making rather than leaving the AI up to make all the decisions. But
for me, it is a tool, and you need to master the tool. This is not my saying. I read this on maybe on X or wherever, but it is not that the AI is going to replace us, but somebody that knows how to use AI might.
Yeah.
So we need to be on top of stuff.
Particularly when it comes to MCP. I feel like MCP is the first thing for, outside of just writing code in an editor. This is the first thing we've seen that really, this agentic idea, but essentially it is the MCP protocol for now. Like that idea is the idea of, oh, no, it can go do stuff now. And that like I've been ignoring the race on the foundational models. Like everyone else, we have to kind of read the headlines, but I don't really switch my models every month just because someone came out with a new Gemini or a new Claude or whatever. But this suddenly made me interested in getting involved with this stuff because this is the moment that it felt like this is something I can actually use in my job now. I just have to figure out what I want it to do, and that's the challenge.
A year ago was prompt engineering.
Yeah.
How to talk to the LLM. Right now, the LLM is amazing at creating prompts. So I just like fed what I need to the LLM and I get like the optimized prompt to reuse it again. Last but not least, I want to show you like something more like a real use case, how to use these managed inference and agents into a real application. Well, this is a demo that I built, but this is an application for a let's say a solar energy company. I have the dashboard where I can access my solar metrics. And let's say I'm opening this. This is the location that I want to check. So here we have two uses. One is the headless use. I just have data. I am performing an API call and I am doing that analysis with an LLM and then getting back the response. And this is what I'm getting here. So it will predict the savings depending of the weather. So now if I go to a different system, the weather is going to be better and it's going to do the prediction and it says it's going to be excellent. And the other one, depending of the weather is not going to be like the weather conditions are not going to be good for my solar system. So now I have that this is not going to be performant. So I'm using a headless agent right now, feeding data and letting the LLM analyze that data for me. And the other one is what we know as the basic usage with an AI, which is the chatbot or the agent. So let me go ahead and open an agent here. And remember that we have these PostgreSQL get schema, run query, code execution. So how can we do that with an application, with my data, and mix everything together? So let's say, okay, what is the average energy consumption in the last 7 days? So I'm asking a question to my agent, and now it's going to start like choosing tools. So it's getting the schema for the database. Before attempting to query the database, it needs to know the shape of the database. When it gets the schema, now it's going to run the query. And depending if it needs to run an application or not, it's going to run the code in Python and then get the response. So we are seeing that it's now querying my database, it's getting all of these metrics, doing some calculations to get the average. And let's see if it needs Python for this one. And when it finishes, I'm going to get the result back on my agent. Okay, it decided to use Python for doing the operation. And it's because I'm in the prompt specifying like also what to use to process the information. So now it's going back to the database. It's going to do a couple of other operations before it gives me the response. But how I'm calling this from my app, if I go to this application that I have here, I have a huge prompt. So this is the prompt for my application. So you are an energy data specialist. This is what you do. This is what this is all the capabilities that you can do. You can generate images. You can calculate data. You have access to different systems through these environment variables. This is how you are going to respond in Markdown with this form. You can access these documents on the internet, etc. And then I am specifying on the HTTP request the tools that it can use. You can use Postgres get schema on this specific database. You can do run query. You can execute code using an MCP. You can perform HTML or PDF to Markdown operations. And at the end, we can get like a response. Now I have the average. And
Nice.
maybe if I ask create a visualization, it will give me like a matplotlib image here generated with that data from Python. Sometimes I'm getting an issue when it doesn't upload the image to S3, but tries to give me like a route directly in the response, and so I cannot render it. But let's see if it does the proper way to store the image with a pre-signed URL. I specified that in the prompt. LLMs
Yeah.
sometimes are kind of stubborn and don't follow instructions pretty well. But yeah, this is I'm using inference, my data, all of those tools to know how like a real agent for a real application. So that's kind of like the power of what you can do with this.
Yeah. That's
And
that's
in the
that's a
Salesforce,
pretty cool demo, by the way.
Oh yeah, thank you. In the Salesforce world, we have Agentforce, which is the like kind of like the low code version to create agents with clicks. It's super powerful to work for Salesforce applications. And we can extend Agentforce also by exposing Heroku services or exposing these inference and tools, exposing NCPs. So also Agentforce can access the external world through these tools. So there is a story for like people that just using Heroku for their applications or companies that are using Salesforce and want to extend the agents with more things. See, it tried to do it directly and not giving me the URL, but it generated an image somewhere.
Well,
And
it
yes,
wouldn't be an
that's
LLM demo without us having either a
of
hallucination or
of
a failure of
of
something.
course.
Yeah.
So create a visualization, but upload it to the store. Okay. I will leave it in there. Let's see if it works. If not, but that's pretty much what we have. Go again, heroku.com/AI. Take a look at what we have. We also have our official Heroku official YouTube channel. We have been publishing videos. We have the blog, blog.heroku.com. You can go ahead and take a look at our most recent content, and we are continuously creating content for you all, so you get used to all the cool things we have been creating here at Heroku.
Nice. And where can people find you? I'm assuming you're making some stuff or talking about stuff somewhere online.
Of course, of course. So you can find me on X with Julián_Duque. You can find me on Blue Sky, julianduque.co. Julian, like my name, or Julian. I don't use that my Starbucks name. I'm from Colombia, so I will use my Spanish name better. And I write content for the Heroku YouTube channel, the Heroku blog, and we are also going to relaunch the Heroku podcast. So you're going to be hearing my voice pretty soon. So stay tuned. We have a lot of things in our kitchen getting prepared right now for you
Yeah.
all.
You heard it here first. Breaking news.
Yeah, breaking news.
Podcast is back, baby.
Oh yeah.
So, okay. So it's thinking. It's thinking.
It will.
We're biding our time to see if it'll.
Let's see if it works. If it doesn't work, it's okay. I will need to sit down and fix the prompt to do this better.
Yeah. Thanks, Robot Glock. Thanks for. I'm glad you liked the demo.
Of course. Is there any question in
Yeah.
the
Anybody out there have
chat?
any last questions? I was going to actually, while we're waiting on that, I was going to throw back to my diagram real quick. So I'm realizing I've actually got something I'm leaving out a little bit because this is a little too simplified. Over here we have Claude somewhere actually.
Oh yeah, that's the inference model that we are using.
Yeah, and so I'm not sure if you described it, but so in this case you have a web app that is essentially a chat interface. We're going to call that the Heroku app. Is it passing everything to Sonnet on the back end? Like, is Sonnet living inside Heroku? Like, you all are provisioning those, right?
That's where the managed inference word comes from. It is running on our infrastructure, so we are managing those models. So when you are doing the inference or the LLM call, you are going to the Heroku backend.
Right, and so the Heroku backend of Claude isn't it what's calling the tools, not your web app directly? Is this a better? I don't know if you're looking at my screen, but
exactly, it is the inference. Is the inference service is the one that makes the decision of what tool to call, get the result from the tool, and now give you the response back.
Yeah. So in your case, your front end web interface demo is actually simplified by the fact that it is passing this stuff back to the LLM. The LLM's doing all the work, passing information back, and then it's just doing pretty printing, figuring out how to display Markdown and HTML, how to have that React native experience kind of thing. Yeah,
that's pretty much it. You saw on the Postman example, it gives you like a streaming response with like that like OpenAI-like kind of response, and then you process that and show that information in your app as a chat or as a headless agent, or depending how you want to interact with it.
Yeah. Okay. Are we gonna keep waiting on it, or are we done?
No, but we can now call it now. All this code is available. Go to github.com/heroku-examples. We have many demos and
Heroku-examples.
things
Okay.
things that you can see. The chat that I show you initially, the chat application, it's called the AI Inference chat. That's open source. You can go ahead, clone it, see how I build that thing, run it yourself, modify it to suit your needs. And the Luminar Solar application, we are finishing some things. It is already open source, but we are continuously adding more features. It will have like a dual agent support, one using the Salesforce Agentforce service, and the other one using Managed Inference for custom agents. So that's also something that you can see how we build that. It's available on the Heroku examples org and GitHub.
All right. Well, this has been awesome. I'm excited to play with it. Now I just need to get someone to buy me some credits.
Yes.
But this is some fun stuff, and I love how this happened to me recently with Docker and their idea of how to give you local MCPs on your local system through containers, and this feels like the internet equivalent of that. Just an easy button for, I don't have to be a machine learning expert. I don't have to know how to run GPUs. I get to take advantage of the foundational models you provide, and then I can go find MCP tools that I want to use, but then I don't have to actually run them myself and figure out how to dynamically load them and then dynamically shut them down so that I'm not constantly running a bunch of pods everywhere. Like it does feel very Heroku-like, I have to admit. It is an easy
That's
button.
the Heroku for AI built by Heroku.
All right. Well, you heard it here first, people. It launched this week. We had him on the show. Perfect. Thank you so much, Julián, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I will look forward to seeing you and meeting you in the real world someday at one of the conferences. So,
of course.
And thank everyone for joining, watching the live stream. And this will be coming out as an edited video with the demos and as an audio podcast. You can find all that stuff over here on my website. And we're going to have a bunch of show. Actually, this is like the summer of AI. I'm calling it for this show every Thursday, the summer of AI. It happened by accident because people won't shut up about AI. So I didn't even plan to have a bunch of AI shows, and they all showed up. So this is actually going to be the beginning of a stream of AI or AI adjacent conversations. And I think it's a great one to get started with Heroku. So thanks everybody.
If for some
here.
reason any of you are attending the We Are Developers Congress conference in July in Berlin, I am going to give in a talk, how to build agents with Node.js, LangChain, and all of these amazing things that we show. And you can go and say, hi, that would be amazing.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody. We'll see you next week here on YouTube or Twitch or wherever you find your streams. See you soon.